All right, so now these directives that we have here, for instance, for these item list directives, we need to be able to interact with these, right, and know what's going on, right? If somebody's moving them around, right? And for instance, we would like to make them permanent, yes? And the only place we can make them permanent is to send them over to the server, right? The server is the only place where we can store any permanent data. But first of all, we'll need to be able to identify that something actually moved, right? So to handle that, we can take a look at the jQuery sortable documentation. If you go to the API documentation for sortable, we'll see that you can configure all sorts of event listeners for that deal with the life cycle of widget of sortable. For instance, you can be notified when the sorting actually starts. When does it stop? Right. So there's a couple of things we'd like to know, right? As you move them around, if we need to know where were you and where are you now after you resorted, we could send that over to the server. The server could then modify the array, right, back on the server side. But first we need to be able to distinguish these two things, right? So if we look at start, we can configure a callback of when the start of the sorting began, right, and when it stopped, right? So to do that, here in sortable, we can configure that by providing a configurable JSON object that takes everything that can be configured. You can configure the start, meaning what function do you want me to call when the sorting begins, right? So for instance, call this function, right? And we can say console sorting begun and call stop when console log sorting stopped. Okay, so going back here, right? If we start moving around, notice that it says sorting begun on the right hand side. As I sort, nothing happens, right? But when I let it go, it says sorting stopped. Yes? Okay. Now, but that's not enough, right? What we'd like to be able to know is, well, where were you before you started, when you started, and where are you now that I let you go, right? So that meta information is part of some of the arguments that are passed to the function, right? So let's copy those two arguments. Let's pass them around here. So event is the raw browser event, right? That it was generated when this event first got started, right? For instance, it has information like the timestamp when the event begun, right? Where was the mouse exactly when you started dragging, right? The XY position. You know, was there any key that was held down when you started moving this around? Like, so for instance, you could do, you know, control drag or shift drag or, you know, command drag, right? You can distinguish different gestures like that, right? So anyway, that's all in the event object. That's all raw. The other element is UI, represents the actual element that you're dragging, right? It's the object representation of what you're dragging, right? Which can be used to determine where are you, you know, on the screen. So, we can do a console log UI and console log UI. So if we refresh and we drag this around, we let it go. Notice that I can. This is the object that was being used originally to render this. Where's the item? Item. There it is. If I hover over it, it actually has a reference to the original DOM element that was dragged. Okay. So the item element inside of the UI has a reference to the original DOM element. Okay, so I could say UI dot item, and that is the original the element that is actually being dragged. So if I let it go, if I hover over it, there it is. It's that element, right, that was dragged. It has a pointer to the DOM element. Okay. So one of the things that I could do is I think this is a raw element, is it? I think it's a raw element. Yeah, it's a raw element. I could wrap it inside of a jQuery object, convert that into a jQuery object again, right? And I can ask it, what is your index? What is your index? Now that function says, ooh, I must be something inside of my parent. I must be a sibling of many other elements, right? And you're asking me, where am I, right, relative to my siblings, right, based on my parent. So I have a parent element. In this case, it would be the UL, right? The UL is the parent element. It's asking me, where are you with respect to your parent? So let's see if that works. Right, notice that is 0. That's where it was when I let it go, when I first started. Notice if I start down here and I start, notice that it's 3 because it's the third, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. See that? Now let it go. So here this would be 2. There it is, right? So notice it's giving me the index. Where are you, right, at the start? And I can do something similar at the end. Right? So if I start from 0, notice that it says 0, and when I let it go, it says 3. So now I know the beginning and the end, right? Where were you when you started dragging, and where are you when you let go, right? And I can store that. I can store that in a local variable. I can say var start index. I'll start with -1, something invalid, so I know that if something went wrong, it stayed at -1. Yes? So I'll do start index and end index, and I can store that. I can say start index is equal to that value, and the end index, so end index is equal to that. Yes? Right? And at the end, I can say console log at the very end when it stops, when it's all and done, I can print both the start index and the end index. Right, so if I start, I'm moving it around and I let go, it says, this says you were at 0 and they let you go at 3. Yes? So the next thing would be that I would like to be able to send this to the server. Right? I would like to be able to say something $HTTP, right, dot put, and slash API slash widget, and then some index, some ID of some widget. I like to maybe I forget how I forget what the assignment says. I think it says start index, something like that, and provide start index ampersand end, and then end index. Right, so this will generate a put. I need $HTTP. I can ask for it, right, to be injected. Right, so that if I copy and I let it go, it says that it sent a put. It sent a put, but notice that the query is correct. Right, localhost, API, widget, with the start and the end, correct, right? Now, we don't have a server running on the other side that listens for these widgets, but you would have a RESTful put that's listening for this incoming request, and you would look up the widget whose ID is 123. Actually, would it be the widget? It would be the page, right? Right, it would be the page. You would have the page ID, and then the indices of the widgets, right? Because the widgets are part of a page, right? And then you would move them around in the array. Yes? That makes sense? Right. All right, I'll leave that for you to play with. And let me push this. Actually, let me stop this.